Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 36 about Black Manta, the archnemesis of Aquaman.
Who and who?
Come on.
Yeah, at this point, everybody knows Aquaman. I know
he's a little more brotastic, as Jason Momoa has portrayed him, than the usual previous version, say Entourage or the Super Friends cartoon.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Flipper had a tougher reputation than Aquaman did.
Aquaman is actually, as he's written, a badass dude. And I've had numerous conversations with my coworker, Paul, who's a little older than I am and remembers before Aquaman was turned into the pansy that he's perceived to be by a good portion of the public. And I think, in fact, that's one of the reasons why they made this Aquaman so, throwing up shakas and everything, because they wanted to completely distance themselves from that portrayal and show that Aquaman really can be an amazing force. He's basically the Superman of the ocean.
That's a good description. I certainly appreciate that. And when you think of how untamed, quote unquote, the ocean is when we talk about modern society, we still don't live there. We've done lots and lots of things. We've sent people into space. We were able to traverse it, but we don't even know what about 99% of the ocean carries. So I think that's a great point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very fascinating area. I'm always a big fan of Planet Earth or those types of shows. Blue Planet on the Discovery Channel, BBC America. I could listen to, is it David Attenborough or Richard Attenborough? I never remember which one of the Attenborough brothers it is. But he's always so entertaining when he's describing what is happening within the ocean. Come follow me as we journey into the deepest, darkest depths of the Pacific.
If I could hold a straight face, I would ask you to do the entire background in that voice, but I don't think that's necessary.
I don't also think that I could keep it up for the entire episode. Perhaps one day a patron will arise that shall pay for this, and I will definitely do it. So, by the way, it's a little plug. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. If you want to subscribe, you can get some additional content. And if you feel like it's something you're willing to listen to, maybe I will throw it in. I will do an entire episode as a British documentarian. Or maybe it'll be character specific. Maybe if there's a particular character that requires a in-depth look, and if it just so happens that I sound like David Attenborough, then by God, I'll do it. If the fans call for it, I will do it. Give the people what they want. Isn't that what Jameson said last week? He's always about giving the people what they want. As long as what they want is hatred of Spider-Man.
Exactly.
It's Henry Ford. They can have any color they want as long as it's black. Before we get started, quick shout out. Steve O'Neill runs a podcast called Sharp the Podcast. It's available at sharppodcast.com. It is all about productivity, personal development, growth. It's a very fascinating podcast, and it's really something entertaining to listen to. He makes it fun and interesting. But also, if you're into some of the episodes where Doc and I have interacted and I've had epiphanies or Doc has realized something and you've listened to that and you've said, it makes me sort of re-examine things that I've done about my life or ways that I've looked at particular issues that I've had. Steve's podcast is for you. It's definitely about figuring out a way to become more efficient with your life. Also figure out what is holding you back from further advancing where you should be. And so for a show like ours, which does delve into a lot of the mental health aspects to destigmatize it, but also hoping to enlighten people on some of the character flaws or foibles that they may have in a positive way. We're not necessarily trying to knock anybody, but if we can help anybody achieve that sort of enlightenment and self-awareness and move past some of the roadblocks that you may have put in your own path, Steve is definitely the type of guy to set that up for you. So the show is called Sharp the Podcast. It's at sharppodcast.com. He's on Twitter and all the various social media, and give him a listen. Tell him if you happen to listen to it and you like and review, tell him Capes on the Couch sent you.
All right.
So moving forward now, we are going to get into the meat of our episode. Meat, fish. I don't know. Does this episode maybe call for a white wine instead of a red? I don't know if you drink while listening to this, but if you do, this episode calls for a white because it's all about the ocean. It's about Black Manta. Are manta rays endangered? Can you eat them? I don't know. I didn't do that much research into it.
And if you're drinking, drink in moderation, please. Sorry. Had to
I know you did. All things in moderation, including moderation. Black Manta, created by Bob Haney and Nick Cardey in Aquaman number 35, September 1967. Now, Black Manta as a character has a little bit of an interesting backstory in that there's not a lot of consistency in the backstory. So what we're going to try and do in this episode is address some of the issues that have been portrayed throughout the character's history in terms of his dealings with Aquaman. That is one consistent part of it is the hatred and revenge that he seeks on Aquaman. What happened before all of that? It depends on the writer. And we're going to get into that because some of that stuff is just messy and or very clumsily handled, particularly when it comes to some mental health issues. So Doc and I are going to get into that. So the original backstory for Black Manta is that a young black boy was kidnapped from his Baltimore home and forced to work on a ship. Now, he tried to get Aquaman to save him, but he was unsuccessful. I guess Aquaman couldn't hear him or for whatever reason was unable to assist him. He took this as a slight, and he blamed Aquaman in the ocean for his troubles. He ended up killing one of his captors, and he was able to escape. And he saw that Aquaman and the ocean didn't care about him, so he was going to control them so that they would learn to fear him. Then, a later backstory claimed that he was an autistic orphan raised in Arkham Asylum, which, frankly, I don't understand why Gotham even continues to keep Arkham around. We've had this discussion about the Joker and any number of Batman's Rogues galleries. Why does Arkham exist as an institution? It has been shown time and time again to be less than ineffectual.
I think that's a matter of the fact that it's an institution. It's very difficult to just say, all right, get rid of it. The response is always, and replace it with what? What part of the system are you going to be able to influence to say to people, we can control the circumstances that allow for us to help these poor individuals that are causing so much destruction in our society? I don't know if there's a good answer for that. I admit that Arkham is a bad example. That doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is there a way that you could adapt it so that it's better than what it is? Why are we going on this huge tangent about Arkham Asylum? I don't know.
You started it. I didn't. So anyway, he's an autistic orphan. He's raised in Arkham. He enjoyed freezing water, but he hated beds. So he was experimented on, and then he killed the scientist responsible and escaped. And somehow he came to blame Aquaman for his troubles.
Yeah, the other part to this was when he was experimented on, they kept him on the same bed. So the thing that he hated was also the thing that was part of the experiment. So that's a double whammy.
Yeah, that's also a no-no as far as scientific integrity of your experiment is concerned. But anyway, he designed a helmet that allowed him to shoot energy rays from his eyes, and he battled Aquaman on several occasions.
Oh, that's why I thought he sucked, because he reminds me of Cyclops. No, we're not going to.
Oh, that's you. That's all you. That's not even me.
It was a joke, people. It was a joke. To understand.
Black Manta's a dick.
No, but to explain the situation, we've had this running joke about Scott being a dick for the longest time. Scott Summers, Cyclops. I've actually defended him very well in previous episodes, so don't think I'm trying to continue that. But once in a while, we have to get these jokes in. If we don't do that, this thing becomes stale. You won't want to listen to it. We won't continue to do it.
Okay. Again, you started it, not me. I'm just pointing that out. I just feel, in the interest of full disclosure, it needs to be said that for once, I did not start the Scott is a dick comments. I want the pat on the back and the adulation for it. So it was revealed at one point that his goal was to have black people control the oceans as reparations for being enslaved on dry land.
Can we just pump the brakes on that? Now, I don't know where to begin with what's wrong with this. Reparations for... Wait, you want water instead of land, but oh my goodness.
As a white man, I feel entirely unqualified to even be discussing this topic, so...
And as a human being, I feel unqualified to discuss how ridiculous this is.
Well, supposedly...
Who came up with that? No, seriously, I want to know who wrote that. That's insane.
I'm willing to venture it was a white man.
Oh, wow.
So he kills Arthur Curry Jr., Aquaman's son, which understandably enrages Arthur. He sacrifices his soul to a demon in exchange for becoming a human manta ray hybrid, which kind of looked pretty cool. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
because manta rays look badass.
The artwork is great. The premise is stupid.
Yes. I think we find that happen a lot in these types of situations where the writing, you just go, oh, why did they come up with this idea? But God, the artwork is gorgeous.
But I think that goes back to why Aquaman ends up getting short shrift. Because when you think of the ocean, do you automatically think, okay, we may think of sharks. We may think of orcas, killer whales. Other than that, do you really think of animals that look like they're absolutely dangerous, terrifying, horrifying, et cetera, et cetera?
Manta shrimp.
Well, manta shrimp are actual badasses. So,
they so are.
Yeah.
There's a whole oatmeal comic about it. It's amazing.
I'm aware of it. I'm also aware of the actual science experiments that were funded by the government that were mocked unmercifully, but actually had great points, including the fact that apparently the heat generated by a mantis shrimp punch is like almost the equivalent of an atom bomb or something. I may be misquoting that, but something so outlandish about this little thing that can do so much damage. So I guess it comes full circle, and yeah, the ocean is full of badass stuff.
Yeah, including Aquaman. And maybe Black Manta. Maybe. So this human manta ray hybrid scenario is reversed by Aquaman, of all people. So after Arthur dies, Black Manta goes, well, my job is done. I didn't kill him, but he's good. He's dead. I'm fine. He retires and works in a fish market until he discovers that Arthur is resurrected, at which point he burns down the shop and kills all the customers. Because that's a perfectly rational response to have.
I can't help but think of a Simpsons episode with Ralph Wiggum. Do you know the one I'm referencing? He has a leprechaun that talks to him.
Burn them all, laddie.
There you go. But other than that,
I like my leprechaun.
Yeah, other than that, I don't know what to say.
I like my Wookiee.
As you can tell, we're really trying to fill this one up. So let's keep going.
So during the Brightest Day storyline, which followed Blackest Night, we discover that he was a treasure hunter whose pregnant wife was tortured by aliens. The child received powers and was taken by Mera to Earth to be hidden from the aliens, and the child eventually became Jackson Hyde, a.k.a. Aqualad.
Okay.
Because they wanted to introduce Aqualad from the Young Justice cartoon into the comics, and this is how they chose to do it.
As opposed to, hey, here's another person that had some experience with the water and developed within Atlantis, or something that would have made a ton more sense.
Nah. So Black Manta battles Aquaman and cuts his hand off, which then led to Arthur replacing it with a golden spear as a hand.
Okay, I will defend that. I think that was absolutely awesome. Also, when it became a magical fist from the Lady of the Lake.
Yes.
So, yes, there are some things that I think are really cool about Aquaman. I will say that.
Some moistened bitten lobs of scimitar me, they'd put me away. If I went round. Strange women lying in ponds is no basis for... Strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government.
See,
supreme executive commands come from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony.
For anyone who was under the misperception that we were going to end the tangents and the pop culture references and all of that because we had such a clean and awesome episode with J. Jonah Jameson, you are clearly mistaken.
Well, to be fair, Jameson had a lot of material to give us that was substantial to work with. Black Manta, not so much. So we have to fill the space with Monty Python and dick jokes. So he almost succeeds in killing his own son, but he is stopped by Aquagirl and Mera. So now in the New 52, where they just say, we're just going to ignore the whole DC continuity, Black Manta gives Arthur's father a heart attack by accident. So Arthur attacks Black Manta's father in retaliation, thinking it was Black Manta, and killed him. So Manta swears revenge on Arthur. So now neither of them have a dad, and now they're pissed at each other. Maybe they could reconcile with the fact that they lost their fathers almost simultaneously to tragedy, and they would bond over this common horrific experience. No, I'm gonna kill you. So later he goes after the crime syndicate, which is an alternate Earth version of like basically, I don't want to say bizarro versions of the heroes, but just...
No, I wouldn't say bizarro. I'd just say outright like the evil sides.
Yes, no, they're definitely the villainous sides of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, etc. So he goes after Ultraman because Ultraman creates a massive tidal wave that washes away his father's grave. And now he's like, you need to die because you just desecrated my father's grave.
Now, having said that, wouldn't you think he'd be okay with that idea because he wanted everything to be in the water in the first place?
Logic. You're looking for it where there is none. So let's start with the issues. The first one, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the autism. Now, the autism that the character was portrayed as having was so inaccurate as to be ridiculous and pretty much offensive. The autism was claimed to be the source of his anger and violence. And when he got the autism, basically all he did was just say, swim, swim, because he had previously been functional and verbal. But now when he attacks Aquaman, all he says is swim, swim. As though the only exposure to autism that the writer had was watching Rain Man. I have worked with a number of disabled individuals. I've made reference on the show to my experience with Extra Life and the Children's Miracle Network and Children's Miracle Network affiliated hospitals, which have been a great source of joy and pride for me being involved with such a fantastic organization for about 20 years of my life. I've met a number of individuals with learning disabilities and on the autism spectrum, both with high functioning autism, Asperger's, etc. I have never in my life met an individual with autism as portrayed in the books as given to Black Manta. And I really don't know where to go with this.
I don't know exactly where to go with it either, because I think you've pointed it out very well. I will point out also some of our potential external factors. You made your case with your experiences with Extra Life, Children's Specialized Hospitals. I will make my case dealing with situations in emergency room settings, which can also include patients with a poor ability to communicate and are nonverbal and live in group home environments. I don't know how they got this far off base. I wish I knew how to even rectify it. I'm dumbfounded. A person is still a person. The way he's portrayed is almost considered a different species. I don't know how to... I apologize if I sound a bit flustered, but I think that type of portrayal can do a disservice. We also are in an area where autism is well diagnosed. I will get into a couple of auxiliary points to that. Our area has a high rate compared to many other parts of the world. Why is that? Do we have a larger concentration of people with autism? I don't think so. I think it's because the amount of research that has been done, as well as the amount of effort for the education of people dealing with the population that has any part of the autism spectrum, is well versed at this point. And so we're able to recognize it fairly quickly compared to many other service areas in the country and in the world that don't have as much of a recognition for those symptoms. So take what we say with a bit of a grain of salt, because we deal with it a lot. You would think that would mean that we're much better experts at it. And maybe that's true. But it also means that we have personal connections often and recognize that people throw those personal connections away when they discuss it. You mentioned Rain Man, which I think actually did a bit of good for autism because it put it on people's radar. The problem is no one went past that. No one went further to actually explain when mentioning social cues, it's not just the echolalia that you just described or saying one word repeatedly. That's not really considered a true component. It's whether or not when I'm smiling, frowning, laughing, crying, the person may not be able to recognize what that means.
Exactly.
If they don't recognize what that means, then it leaves the opportunity for misinterpretation, which is important, but it also leads to a lack of connection and potential misunderstanding. And also, if you aren't able to read well other people's emotions, you may not have the proper schema for yourself and your personal emotions. And that may mean, not always, but may mean that your expression of emotions may be different from other people's. That does not mean that your emotions are invalid. That does not mean that your emotions should be ignored, which, in my opinion, is the way it was portrayed in the comics.
Say it louder for the people in the back. No, because seriously, and you mentioned the inaccurate Hollywood portrayals. I myself was diagnosed with a mild version of Tourette's when I was younger. And unfortunately, everyone assumes Tourette's equals coprolalia, which is basically the unfiltered swearing and the fact that people just yell out obscenities without the ability to control themselves. Only about 3 to 5% of people with Tourette's actually exhibit coprolalia symptoms. The vast majority of them are other facial tics, verbal tics, other body things that they do. I do a lot of stuff with my hands. That's my tic. I also have some tics with my face. When I was younger, I would twitch my nose like a rabbit. That was my tic. It didn't mean that I was just walking around like Deuce Bigalow yelling obscenities all the time. But unfortunately, Tourette's is one of those things that gets incredibly mishandled. I think of all things, South Park did an incredibly sympathetic job with the episode where they showed Cartman, who thought Tourette's was just screaming obscenities, met other people with Tourette's who all had actual tics, and they were portrayed as sympathetic. Cartman, of course, is never portrayed as sympathetic. But I thought that of all things, as soon as I found out that South Park was going to be covering Tourette's, I braced myself and said, oh, this is going to be rough. And they handled it very, very well. And I credit Parker and Stone for doing that.
Yep.
This, getting back to Black Manta, this is not like any autism that I've actually seen. Autistic people are not by their nature anger or violent. They may, as you said, have an inability or a different method of expressing themselves, but that's because they may not always be shown a more accurate version of how to express those emotions, and it leaves them frustrated. And the response to that is not to shun them or not to blame them for that. It's to talk with them and find out and get them to increase their exposure is basically what I'm getting at. So that was bad enough. And then moving into the next thing, which is a two-prong, he's cured of his autism by a serum that turns him into this manta ray human hybrid as a result of the deal with the devil. So now, first off, he's cured of his autism, which has its own stigmas that, you may or may not want to address, Doc, in terms of being normative or.
Oh no, I'm going to take it there. I mean, honestly, this is not much different than people used to say you pray the gay away. That's how offensive that is. I can't believe that you would have a situation where a person is able to still function, is able to have all of the experiences that we as human beings are supposed to have. But because that they have them in a way that we're not used to or is unique to that individual compared to those around him, we're going to completely invalidate it and say that it needs to be removed like it's a tumor? Seriously? That's the way it was portrayed. That's what it was. You have to just get it out, get rid of it. And this magic serum, which we know doesn't exist, which is true for mental health as a whole, because you can't shut your brain up or shut your brain off the way that we would sometimes like to. And it involved invoking spirituality. It invoked the idea that it's a quote unquote deal with the devil. The whole point that you can't do anything for yourself, but this magical entity is going to get it all out. Or this scientific breakthrough that doesn't exist. If you just wait for that, everything's going to be better.
And then to boot, not only does he make the deal with the demon to cure the autism, but it turns him into this human hybrid. So then he has to lose his humanity, and he would rather be this animal hybrid than be a person with autism. Again, horrifically offensive. And I just thought that I know it sounds like we're harping on this. This is not the entirety of Black Manta as a character, but it is so poorly written that we cannot just disregard it. It has to be addressed, particularly because it does deal with mental health issues, but also because we have to just say very plainly, this is not okay. This was not okay when it was written, and it wasn't written that long ago. I think this was only about 20 years ago or so. It's not like this was written back in the 60s or previous eras where, again, not to say that it was okay then, but there was not as much of an understanding. This was late 90s, early 2000s this was written. Again, I don't want to say that it was a bastion of understanding, but they knew people with autism and on the spectrum were not to be feared or shunned even then. And so, again, to go through this situation where they literally undergo this body transformation to eliminate themselves of autism, to be cured of the autism, to be turned into a human hybrid. And this all happens because you make a deal with a demon. This is, again, a slap in the face to the millions of people worldwide on the spectrum who are not necessarily, again, what we call normative in the way that they deal with their emotions. And as I said, as someone who works with these people, who works with people on the spectrum, who has experienced a number of them, they are just as wonderful. And I don't realize I'm saying this is coming from privilege, that they're just as wonderful as you or I, but we have to destigmatize it. And that's one of the things that we do in the show is we destigmatize.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Part of the other concerns with any diagnosis of autism can be things that many people would consider positive. For example, an intense focus on certain concentrations. If a person happens to be incredibly, let's say, scientifically oriented, and therefore they focus much of their adult life on research, I think that's a boon to humanity. They may have other experiences in other aspects of their life that they may want to get assistance with, or they need a greater understanding from other people about what's going on. I wouldn't say, my goodness, don't dare have autism because you'll become a scientist. Do you realize how absurd that sounds? The way I'm saying it? The reason why I'm getting frustrated right now is because that's part of what was invoked here with the Black Manta character. It was, yeah, but because he was autistic, he became a scientist and he, did all this stuff and he was an evil genius. I'm like, that's not necessarily a package deal, and don't convey it that way. That's not fair to anyone that's had other experiences. The idea sometimes that comes across is because someone is autistic, therefore they're not going to be able to appreciate I swear I'm not making this up. There was the theory that people with autism could not experience art. They couldn't experience it the way that, quote unquote, the normal people did, or music, or entertainment, or any of those other things. And that's absurd. It's a comic, for crying out loud. You'd figure that there'd be a more nuanced way to approach it, but nah, it didn't happen.
No, there wasn't. And, again, I recognize that we're getting agitated, but it's just, it's absurd to me. And I'm gobsmacked that this was allowed to be printed by a major company. This isn't some independent publisher. This is DC. Time Warner. Oh, someone okayed this. Numerous people okayed this. And I just...
Okay, I think, you know what? I usually don't do this. I don't jump in, but I think we really should transition then to another issue because we can rail on this as much as we want. But I think, especially with our audience, they're cognizant of it. They're aware that at times things are not going to be portrayed ideally. And to their credit, there are other parts of Aquaman storylines where Black Manta, to invoke Samuel L. Jackson, is a bad mofo.
Yes.
And so I have to say that some of the stories that were written are well written. It's just that, especially from an origin or change in development standpoint, they just really muddy the waters. I realize the connotation that just gave because we're dealing with, water-based characters, but still, that's what we're dealing with. It's not fair to, I'm sure, many people that work on the artwork, that work on making these great storylines for so many characters, to say that we should just eliminate all of these other things. That's not fair. I'm glad that people are willing to take the effort to think outside the box and give people unique origins. I think that should be commended. But if you're going to go out on that limb, can you do me a favor and check all the branches that go along with it?
Yeah. Well, let's get into a happier discussion, hopefully, then. Nope. Looking at our notes, the race angle that was used to previously justify his anger. He was an angry black man, and he wanted to control the oceans as a way to make up for how black people were mistreated on land by controlling the oceans and saying black people should live in the oceans to get away from the horrible white man. And just even as a white man, I'm reading this going, oh boy. Doc, this is all on you. I'm not touching this one with a 39.5-foot pole.
Okay. I am going to acknowledge that there is no way I am going to be able to convey the proper level of sophistication to deal with all of the potential nuance of a discussion about race and its portrayal in comics. I am sure there are plenty of other philosophers,
sociologists,
specialists that deal with this on a daily basis, and I know better than to swerve way out of my lane. I get that.
I'm sure Michael Harriot would have a lot to say from the root.
I'm trying my best to be careful here.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, maybe?
Yeah. I get the idea that when someone is angry, they have a certain motivation. I get that when someone has a certain level of trauma, they may have a propensity, or at least the thought, even if it's not the majority of what they're consuming their life with potential retribution, retaliation, vengeance, whatever terms you want to use. That's all fine. And storytelling is often predicated on that. That's okay. But so many times when race is invoked as that motivation, it becomes overwhelming, oversaturating, and doesn't allow for any nuance in the narrative. So you end up with a character that has to be all things to a certain group of people. And I dare say, depending on the circumstance, when you look at when this character was developed, when was that?
This was probably in the 70s. This was written.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to wager that it was being written by a white man. And as a white man who has read numerous comics, particularly based on the industry by white people, particularly back in those days, black people were treated as a monolith and not given the full cultural, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, diversity in the portrayal across the diaspora that they are deserving of.
For someone who said that you weren't touching it, you seem to dive right in and dive in very well.
Well, thank you. I have done my best to engage myself in areas, or at least educate myself in areas outside of my immediate privileged sphere. I try to read different stories and magazines and articles and viewpoints so that I can be more aware of what I don't know and how much I don't know about it. I literally have the root bookmarked. No, I'm being dead serious.
I know you're being serious. I know. But I think that's the point. This type of conversation evokes that type of needed response. On my end, I'm going to approach this in a productive way rather than dealing with all of the other sociological aspects that I'm not as comfortable with. I'll say from my experience and reading about similar experiences through history that there was a time, and it is not as long as we think, where purely on the basis of race, there are certain expectations. I know we refer to this as prejudice, but hear me out. There's another side. Intellectualization used to be something that you had to fight hard for as an African American. You couldn't be a smart black person. It just didn't exist. I appreciate the fact that a character was given that level of agency, that level of license, where basically they are pointing out he is a scientist, evil scientist, so be it, but a scientist that was able to create this helmet, able to do these things, even in spite of any other quote-unquote diagnosis, back to the autism thing and all that. That's a positive. Where things fall apart with those portrayals often is that that particular character has to be representative of all of blackness, whatever you want to call it. I don't like doing that because I'm pretty sure he wanted to live his life. He wanted to do his thing. I know that he's written that certain way, but at the same time, no one wants to, well, few people want to be a monolith. So I'll approach it from that standpoint. But there's also another side that happens that's supposed to be a positive, but ends up being counterproductive. And that is an overcompensation where there's the expectation that because you've been treated poorly in the past, every other interaction you have now has to make up for it. And the people around that person have to make up for it somehow, even though that's not possible. I'm sorry, there is no actual scorecard in life. There really isn't.
Regardless of what the good place would have us believe.
So that creates its own dynamic. And I think they do an adequate job, not even with race, just in general with Black Manta pointing out he makes changes in his life. He does things when he thought he could move on, and clearly he couldn't. But the idea that any decision that you make, any action that you do, the question that comes up is, are you doing it because you're black? That's a weight that I don't know I can put into words.
Yeah, I never get asked, are you doing this because you're white? It's just, if I do something, I do it. If I have an interaction with someone, I have the interaction. I don't carry all of these additional eyes on me as being the representative of the rest of my race. That's privilege. That is the exact definition of privilege. And that is a lengthy discussion for a much different podcast, an entirely different show.
You know, we've gone pretty dark with this, and I don't mean that as a pun. I really don't. I am grateful for the skit that we've written. I'm just going to say that up front because we need to lighten this up a little bit. I know we haven't even done treatment yet, but
Yeah,
I just had to say that.
We looked at this and we were like, oh, well, there's not a lot here. We're going to have to fill time or whatever. No, I think we did pretty good. So treatment in universe, I would think, and I don't want to entirely speak for you, but I'm going to presuppose. We're going to ignore the autism. We're going to ignore the race angle. We're going to ignore all of that in terms of treatment for Black Manta. And we're going to focus on the vengeance, and we're going to focus on the anger, regardless of the root cause of that anger. We're just going to try and address that and how to deal with that. Am I correct in supposing?
Yes.
Okay. How do you do that?
Oh, boy. He needs a comfortable environment. And so based on how he's reacted to things, I would start in a water-based environment. I understand that. It gives him a certain advantage from the start, but it's a risk I'd be willing to take. The topic of Aquaman has to come up. Where he wants to start with it, it's not directly related to the race, but I will say, is this a matter of getting even? Because once again, we have to eliminate this so-called scorecard. I'd have to get him to the mindset that we're not trying to keep track anymore. Because the more he does that, the worse his anger becomes. Because the way society is already shaped, I do think there's a game involved, but it's skewed towards you do beneficial things as a whole, you're more than likely going to end up with long-lasting results. So the fact that Black Manta always looks at killing a person that in his own society with Aquaman is viewed as the ultimate hero and its leader, you're setting yourself up to have limited supports. And it's an unlevel playing field, magic aside. You're in his zone. You're not going to magically win that, because even when you tried to magically win it, you lost. So why are you taking the same approach over and over again in someone else's territory when you can foster something for yourself in a completely different way? Getting him out of the water, and I do mean that literally, might be a huge risk because he feels uncomfortable, but I think it would allow for this uncharted territory to become the ultimate opportunity. He can branch off and do different things. He has this technology that he creates. Great. Is there another way you could use it? You have people that you say you want to help. Great. Can you actually talk with those people? Because he seems to be working from this premise of you build a better mousetrap and leave a path to your door. Or if you kill all the mice, somehow everyone is happy. I don't know. He skews it. And I'd want to flip that. Why don't you try directly helping people instead of trying to eliminate something that you consider to be a problem?
So you want him to be a fish out of water?
Yes.
Fair enough. Out of universe, there's a lot to unpack here, and I don't know what the equivalent would be. I don't want to...
Oh, I got it.
Okay. All right. If you have an idea.
I thought of this before this episode even started, because I'm going to give an example of someone who I think actually is a bastion to the field. There is a woman by the name of Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is a postgraduate level agricultural expert. She was diagnosed on the autism spectrum at a young age. She actually included one aspect that was mentioned in the comics here. She had a difficult time with certain physical, tactile sensations. And she did have some difficulty with social interactions. But regardless of that, as I said, she has a great education. And she ended up in a field where she was able to use her own personal experience. This is going to sound scary, to relate to animals. She created a device for herself first that would give her a comforting hug that would allow her to calm down under stressful situations. And she extrapolated from that the idea that if I'm experiencing this as a living organism, maybe these animals that we don't consider to be that smart are experiencing things like that too. Now, she is not a vegetarian as far as I know, so much of her research did have to do with butchering, slaughtering, things like that. I'm not trying to make a judgment value on that. What I'm saying is, her point is, if animals have to go through that, is there a more humane way they could go through it so that they're not suffering as much? And much of her research and technology went towards improving the quality of life for animals, even animals meant for slaughter. So it didn't matter what people labeled her as. She went about her life the way that she wanted to, and still does, as far as I know. I think she's still alive. The reason I bring that up is I think that's an idea of what Black Manta, if you took all of the superhero-y stuff out of it, could have been.
It's funny you mentioned the technology to give her a hug. I'm thinking, is that like the thunder blanket? Or,
you know what, that might be. I don't know the name of it. I apologize.
I don't remember the name of it either. But the shirt that you put on dogs for thunderstorms to calm them down, to give them the hugs, or fireworks or whatever, to get them to stop freaking out. My late dogs definitely would have benefited from that.
Right, but the point being, and I'll admit that doesn't even come to the idea. What am I doing for quote unquote treatment? I could be talking to this person the same way I talk to any patient. It doesn't have to be that super different or special. If a person's nonverbal, don't get me wrong, I know that I need to reach out to other experts. For example, I'm going to plug my wife, who has a degree in assistive technology, so people are able to communicate even if they're not able to verbalize what's going on. She finds alternative methods, or at least in her degree she did. That's not what she does personally, although she does work with preschoolers with autism. So I think there are so many variations on the spectrum on how to manage things. It depends on what the particular issue is. They didn't do a good job giving like a proper format, so it's tough for me to specifically say what. But if a person has sensory concerns, then there are plenty of techniques that are available with developmental pediatricians, because catching it early is way better than trying to deal with the aftermath with an adult, that will allow a person to develop the proper communication style. There are plenty of examples of assistants that are able to make sure children and adults manage social cues and find a way to express emotion that yields the most positive outcome. Yes, if there is a concern about intense emotions or impulse, things like that, medication can be a tool in the toolbox. If you've never heard me utter that phrase before, then you've never listened to a single episode of this podcast, because I've said it so many times.
Yeah, seriously.
I will give a specific medication depending on the severity of the spectrum of autism, and that is risperidone, because that is considered FDA-approved treatment. But once again, it's a tool in the toolbox. It is not a cure. As a matter of fact, I'm willing to say, if I ever hear someone say they found a cure, I'll say, how did you find a cure for humanity? Because that does not exist. People are always going to have their own way of processing things. People are always going to have their unique experience of emotions. So
yeah, we're not trying to cure anyone who isn't neurotypical.
Right.
Also, it's funny you mentioned that, because I was wondering, or it just occurred to me, maybe we should have brought in Mrs. Issues as an expert on the show to talk about autism and her dealings with particularly given his backstory as an autistic orphan.
I had a conversation with her and told her that we were doing this character, and I told her some of the background, and I don't think she would have minded coming on the show, but I think especially with the reactions that we had when we were discussing the issues, you know my wife. Do you really think we would have been able to get through this without having to completely modify the decibel level on all of this, I think the rest of our show would have been useless. We would have been muted out.
Or we just had to do a lot of bleeping.
Probably both.
Yes.
So I'll say that. She's very passionate about what she does and what she cares about. And that's a good thing. I was going
to say she's very passionate about everything.
That is fair. That's totally fair.
I love your wife dearly. She is a wonderful person, but she is not a meh. That's not who she is.
I totally agree, and she knows that that's a compliment.
Yes, I say that with love. I say that with love. Right. You know with Mrs. Issues where you stand and on everything. She is not shy about this. So I guess what we're going to do now is do our level best to attempt to work with Black Manta. So let's find out what happens when Black Manta gets on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Mr. Manta? I'm sorry. Can I call you something a little more personal?
Call me David.
Okay, David. I'm Dr. Issues.
Can I have a glass of water?
Sure, here you go.
Thank you.
All right. Now, before we get started into the main topics, I have to ask, is your name Black Manta because you're black?
What kind of stupid question is that? Especially coming from a fellow black man, you know the issues we deal with on a regular basis. That kind of ignorance is why I fought for years to provide people of color with a home in the ocean, to get away from the oppression of the white man. Our people have been enslaved for centuries on dry land. It's only fitting that we receive reparations by controlling the oceans, which, I might add, are 70% of the planet. So really, we control more Earth than the white man. But it's questions like those that make me fight even harder. Get woke, brother, and realize what has happened to you.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Also, yes.
What?
I am Black Manta because I'm black. Do you have a problem with that?
No. Let's just move on.
Can I have another drink of water?
Sure.
Thanks.
You know what? That actually is a perfect transition. You seem so focused on the water. Can you explain that to me?
The water is where my innocence was taken from me. It's been the source of my worst nightmares and most horrific moments in my life. My archnemesis claims he can control the water. So in order to defeat him, I must master all water, even beyond him.
I'll commend you for leaning in, or rather diving into an area of potential fear, but your focus on revenge doesn't appear to yield the type of results you're looking for. Can you come up with an alternative approach? Maybe we can do it together.
Does it involve bed sheets?
What? No.
Okay, so far so good. I hate those. They feel like sandpaper.
Is there anything else that gives you sensory discomfort?
Heat.
All right. Yeah, I know from my research that you've been quote-unquote cured of autism, but I want to explore that in a real clinical nature. I mean, for example, how well are you able to understand social cues?
Oh, I understand them fine. People smile at me, I kill them. People frown at me, I kill them.
That's not really what I meant. Okay, I'll make it more basic. What emotion does smiling convey?
Happy.
Thank you.
I'm happy when I'm going to kill people.
See, what you're doing right now is placing your emotional responses in the place of others. I'm asking what the other person's emotion is.
Can I have a glass of water?
No, not until you answer this question.
Do you want me to kill you?
Here's your water.
Thank you.
Boy, I get the sense that violence is your way of avoiding any discussion of reciprocating emotions.
Oh, I understand emotions just fine. I just don't like them. They get in the way.
Well, there's a strange thing about emotions. They don't go away. In fact, the more you attempt to avoid them, the more they tend to manifest when you least expect them. So that includes any of your schemes to destroy Aquaman.
Doc, I get it. I was perfectly fine in the fish market one day. I was minding my own business, and suddenly I discovered that Aquaman was still alive. Do you know how I responded to that?
How?
I killed everyone in the fish market and I burned the whole thing to the ground.
And that's why acting independent of emotion can backfire badly.
But I did feel emotion in that moment. I felt angry. I felt sad.
And we're back to you projecting your emotions onto others. I think this is going to be the biggest barrier to you having the kind of life that doesn't lead to such intense anger in the first place. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. If you can't, I'll show you how.
I can't put myself into someone else's shoes. I want to put myself in Aquaman's. He thought I killed his father, so he killed mine. We understand each other very well. And he's king of the oceans. I want to be king of the oceans. It's not that complicated. He's in my way.
I hope you recognize that I can't condone continued violence for the sake of previous violence. Is there a diplomatic solution to this problem?
He gives up his crown and swears fealty to me.
Okay, we both agree that's not likely.
Then I have no other choice.
Can you modify your goal?
Can and will are two different things.
Oh, this may be dangerous to ask, but I'm desperate. Do you have a common opponent with him?
The crime syndicate.
Okay. If they were a large enough threat, would you be willing to work with Aquaman?
Ultraman destroyed my father's grave. If he will help me strike the killing blow, I'll avoid killing Aquaman long enough to see Ultraman die.
Killing? Why does it always have to be killing?
Can I have another drink of water?
Do you have like a UTI or something, or hormonal imbalance?
I don't like being on dry land this long. I need to stay hydrated.
You know what? Sure, have as much water as you want. Forget the other stuff I said. There's something significantly wrong with your situation. I don't think either one of us is on the right track right now. I'll tell you what. I'm a doctor. I need to get back to the basics, so I think we're going to need to do some blood work.
Well, considering you brushed off the oppression of our people, I really don't care about much what you have to say.
Well, you're right. You know what? There's so much more you could be doing besides killing. Do you want to be seen as another inner city guy from B-More that thinks violence is the answer for everything? Like an underwater Avon Barksdale?
Who?
It's a Wire reference. Anyway, the point is there are so many people looking for a positive African-American role model, and they don't even know it. Plus, on top of that, you're the representative to a whole underwater race whose first impression is a man that's this manta ray suit shooting laser beams at them and happens to be black. Is that a good look?
I had designed that suit to particular specifications to allow myself to breathe underwater while still providing myself with...
Hold it. You're kind of missing my point here. I wasn't knocking the suit. I'm saying it's hard to shake hands with a closed fist. You're intelligent enough to be a diplomat instead of a dictator. How do we make that shift?
But I really like the suit.
Then wear the suit. That's fine. I'm saying have a more open dialogue.
I'll consider it.
I realize you'll consider it better if I also make this offer. How about we have the next session at the aquarium? Deal?
Deal. Can I have a glass of water?
Just take the tank and get out.
Thanks, Doc. So your water bill's going to be really high this month.
I think it's worth it.
Okay.
Well, he didn't kill me. That was the number one thing.
Yes, this is true. You got out of it and you didn't die.
Yeah. Compared to other people where I didn't expect it, he was very upfront about wanting to kill people.
Yes. Moving to the country, going to kill a lot of people.
Now, no one's going to get that reference.
No, but you do. And that's all that matters.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's a 20-year-old inside joke for literally just the two of us.
That's right.
Just the two of us. I don't know where this music is coming from. It's last week with the Jameson, we had like hardly any. The last couple episodes really haven't had a lot of pop culture references, and then this one, it's just we've been saving them all up.
Yeah.
So next week's episode, I know you're very excited. Negan from The Walking Dead,
aka the supposed to be winner of our poll. If our listeners didn't perform so disappointingly.
We'll have to do that again. We'll have to figure out another character or series of characters to do for the listener poll, because I really enjoyed that. And especially, I think our listener base has grown quite considerably since then. So I'd be very curious to see what some of our new listeners would say. Certainly, we can't rerun it for now, but we'll do Negan and then we'll save Rick for another point. Maybe we'll do Rick. I was going to say we could do Rick in October when The Walking Dead comes back, but Rick isn't on The Walking Dead anymore.
Right.
Then again, neither is Negan or the governor.
Yep.
So they're all dead. I don't know. But in any case, next week is Negan. The following week, to tie in with the premiere of Doom Patrol on DC Universe, we're going to be doing The Chief. So listen to that episode if you are a fan of Doom Patrol. And then the week after that, as requested by our patron Brian, we'll be doing one of my two top favorite comic book characters of all time, Steve Rogers, Captain America.
Yep. we will do our best to make sure that cuts in at about under 3 hours or so.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. Certainly the history. We'll try and cover as broad-based as we can, not getting into too many of the specifics.
We have to make sure that we have special guards so that Anthony doesn't drool on the mic the entire time.
It's not that bad. Besides, the mic is out, so I'm not going to be drooling over it unless the mic is below me, and that's not proper microphone technique.
Oh, look at you, Mr. Audio Smarty Pants.
I'm a microphone fiend. I only wish I was as good as Rakim. Anyway, so thank you very much for listening. To wrap it up, you can find all of our shows on our website, capesonthecouch.live. We're available on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, pretty much all the major platforms. You can check us out on social media. We're on Twitter at Capes on the Couch, Instagram at Capes on the Couch. You can email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. If you listen to our show on a platform that allows you to rate and review, please leave a positive rating and review, and we will read those back in your rating may make a future episode. I think that's about it. Oh, and our Patreon, patreon.com/capesonthecouch, where you can subscribe at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels, and you can continue to support this show and all the amazing, fantastic content. Because if we reach $50 a month in our patrons, we will start live streaming the recording sessions, and you can see all of the wacky stuff that happens leading up to and during the recording sessions for our shows, and it is quite entertaining to be in before all of the editing and splicing and cleaning up happens. So, Doc, before we leave, anything you want to add?
So, should I change my moniker from Dr. Issues to Black Doctor?
For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.